Kate Balmer. I'm a practicing barrister at Devereux Chambers, and I'm joined today by Diana Cotton QC, a former member of Chambers, for an interview to celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th of March. Diana was called to the bar in 1964, at a time when there were very few women practicing as barristers. She then forged an extraordinarily successful career as a barrister and a judge. This included being appointed a recorder in 1982 and taking silk in 1983, when she was only the 23rd woman ever to have been appointed a QC. Diana was then appointed a Deputy High Court judge in 1993 and became a tribunal judge in the Criminal Injuries Compensation Appeal Tribunal and Mental Health Review Tribunal. She was also appointed a bencher of Middle Temple in 1990. She then continued in practice before retiring from Chambers in 2011. Alongside her career, Diana is a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. I joined Chambers as a pupil barrister in 2009, and I had the privilege of not only working with Diana as a colleague in Chambers, but also very briefly sharing a room with her during my pupillage. Diana, it is a real pleasure to see you again, and thank you so much for joining me today. As we think about International Women's Day, did you have any strong female role models when you were growing up?
Well, I suppose the only role model I had really was my mother, because she worked, which for a middle-class woman in the early 1950s was a pretty extraordinary thing to do. Women, even if they had worked before marriage, would give it up on marriage. Indeed, the job my mother had when she got married, she was required to resign on marriage. She didn't tell them that she had got married. Instead, she continued in her job until she became pregnant, and then she had to resign and did. And then she didn't work again until I was 7. I have an older sister, but they're just the two of us. So when I was 7 and was in school all day, then she went to work. And because she had to work and look after children, which, as I say, in those days you really didn't do if you were middle class, she chose to teach, although she wasn't a trained teacher.
What motivated you to pursue a career at the bar in the 1960s when so few women were doing so?
Well, I suppose it was accidental, really, in that when I was about 15, we had a class teacher at school who was interested in careers. In those days, you didn't have any such thing, or we didn't have any such thing as a careers mistress, nothing like that. Anyway, she was interested in careers, so she got a whole lot of literature about different careers and invited us to have a look at it. And one of these was a booklet about being a barrister, and another was a booklet about being a solicitor. And I read both, and I thought, oh, being a barrister, that sounds rather a nice thing. Perhaps I'll do that. So when I suggested this, both in school and to my parents, everybody said, oh no, dear, you can't do that. Women can't be barristers. If you want to do the law, you must be a solicitor. So I thought, oh, right, well, I won't do that then. I want to be a barrister, I don't want to be a solicitor. Okay, I'll be a doctor instead. And that lasted for about a year. And then, as I say, I have an older sister. She then, in fact, got a place at medical school to become a doctor. So I thought, right, I can't be a doctor because I'd be in competition with her and she might be better than me. So that wouldn't be any good. So I thought, right, okay, I shall be a barrister. I don't care what they say, I shall be a barrister. So that's really how it happened. It could have been a disaster, but in fact, it wasn't.
What challenges, if any, did you face during your career as a result of your gender?
Well, when I started, there was quite a lot of prejudice against women. As I'd been told, no, dear, women can't be barristers. And that was basically what, excuse me, basically what people thought, including a lot of people at the bar. And as a result of that, it was more difficult for women to get work because a lot of solicitors said, oh, I'm not having a woman, thank you very much. And you were allowed to do it in those days. There was no such thing as equality and discrimination. And particularly if you were doing crime, and when I started, you did absolutely everything, including crime. And so a solicitor might ring up and say to the clerk, right, I'd like Mr. Smith to represent Bloggins at the Bow Magistrates Court. And he'd say, I'm very sorry, Mr. Bloggins is otherwise engaged, but I can offer you Miss Cotton. Oh, no, my client wouldn't have a woman, thank you very much. And that really did happen. I mean, I heard it happening. It was no fiction. And then some judges were definitely misogynistic. There's no two ways about that, and could be very unpleasant, which isn't to say that they couldn't be unpleasant to men as well, because judges in those days were much less civilized than they are today. And some were extremely unpleasant to everybody, but some were particularly unpleasant to women. However, I wouldn't say that I had came up against any prejudices in Chambers. Chambers were perfectly happy to have me first as a pupil and then as a tenant. And I never experienced any prejudice in Chambers, but I certainly did in the wider bar, and certainly from solicitors, clients, and judges.
What advice would you give on International Women's Day to other women starting out in a career at the bar today?
I think that's quite a difficult question to answer, particularly in the midst of COVID. However, I obviously don't have any personal experience of how that operates. I mean, my basic advice would be what it's always been, which is, if that's what you want to do it, go for it. If it doesn't work out, you'll have opportunities to do other things. It's not a disaster if it doesn't work out for you to practice at the bar. You'll be able to use your qualifications in other ways and get other jobs. So you do, if you want to do it, but you must want to do it. I don't think the bar is a job for somebody who's in two minds about it. I think it's something that you really need to want to do. And if you do, then you'll undoubtedly enjoy it.
Thank you, Diana. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. And it's been really interesting to hear all your stories and experiences. So thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure.